So Donald Trump sat down for a one-on-one interview with podcaster Lex Friedman. And for those of you that don't know Lex, he is a podcaster who is kind of like a lighter, more monotone version of Joe Rogan. He definitely appeals to the bro crowd out there. And I figured that this would absolutely be a softball interview. There was a few moments where Lex tried to corner him, but for the most part, Trump just got thrown the softballs that he's used to. But what was very interesting about this interview is the one point where Lex began to push back a little bit and get confrontational was on the fact that Donald Trump said some bad things about Joe Rogan. And Lex thought that was unfair, and he thinks that Donald Trump should go on Joe Rogan's podcast. And this back and forth right here between Lex and Trump just shows you the exact kind of guy that Trump is. Roll the clip.
Let me ask you about my good friend Joe Rogan. So you had a bit of tension with him. So when he said nice things about RFK Jr., I think you've said some not so nice things about Joe, and I think that was a bit unfair. And as a fan of Joe, I would love to see you do his podcast because he is legit the greatest conversationalist in the world. So yeah. What's the story behind the tension?
I don't think there was any tension. And I've always liked him, but I don't know him. I mean, I only see him when I walk into the arena with Dana and I shake his hand. I see him there, and I think he's good at what he does, but I don't know about doing his podcast. I mean, I guess I'd do it, but I haven't been asked, and I'm not asking them, I'm not asking anybody.
It sounds like a challenging negotiation situation.
No, it's not. It's not really a negotiation. And he's sort of a liberal guy, I guess, from what I understand. But he likes Kennedy. This was before I found this out before Kennedy came in with us. He's going to be great. Bobby's going to be great.
So when Joe Rogan said that he preferred RFK Jr. before RFK Jr. endorsed Trump, then Trump was all down on Joe Rogan, came after him, sent MAGA after him. They was all trying to crucify the guy. And Trump said, wait to see him get booed out of the room come the next UFC fight. And what did Joe Rogan do? He just jumped back in line. It's so funny to me that a guy with Joe Rogan's platform and his following and his money would feel the need to cater to Donald Trump. You heard Trump say there, I hear he's a liberal guy. Yeah, I've heard a lot of people say that Joe Rogan is a liberal. I've heard Joe Rogan say that he has more liberal beliefs. But I don't really think it matters when you are catering to conspiracy theorists, when you are catering to doctors who have been disbarred for denying science, and when you always go out of your way to appease MAGA and jump back in line with Donald Trump. I would have had more respect for Rogan if he said, listen, I'm for RFK Jr. I don't need you. That's where I stand. That's what I said. I'm standing by it. But he always will cater to Donald Trump and MAGA. And Trump was ready to come down on his head. But now that RFK Jr. has endorsed Trump, RFK Jr. has went from being the most radical candidate out there to Bobby. Do you guys remember what Trump had to say about RFK Jr. right here?
RFK Jr. is a Democrat plant, a radical left liberal who's been put in place in order to help crooked Joe Biden, the worst president in the history of the United States, get reelected. A lot of people think that Jr. is a conservative. He's not. He's more liberal than anybody running on the Democrat side. A vote for Jr. would essentially be a wasted protest vote that could swing either way, but would only swing against the Democrats if Republicans knew the true story about him. Jr. is totally anti-gun, an extreme environmentalist who makes the Green New scammers look very conservative by comparison. A big-time taxer, he wants to tax you. An open border advocate. He wants those borders to be wide open for more people to come in from prisons and mental institutions. And he's anti-military and he's anti-vet. He's an extreme liberal. He's radical left.
So yeah, he was the most radical candidate out there. And he went from being the most radical candidate out there to Bobby. And Bobby's going to do a great job. And Joe Rogan went from being, hey, I want to see you get booed out of the room to, well, I think Joe Rogan is good at what he does. I guess I would sit down with him, but I'm not going to ask. Trump is so offended that he's not been asked that he's like, I'm not going to ask him. But trust me, if Joe Rogan asks him to go. He's going to go. He's going to sit down, and MAGA's going to think it's some kind of flex. What they don't realize is that every time Trump sits down for one of these interviews, they throw him softballs, they kiss his ass, And he sits there and does the same tired act, and no one will take him to task. And if he does end up going on Joe Rogan, and I'd say more than likely he will, I really feel like that he will. I've always felt that, even though Rogan said that, he didn't want to help Trump and he didn't want him on the show, I think he would absolutely have him on the show. And I think he would throw softballs. I think he would cater to him. I think he would just continue to further spread the misinformation about the election. I would hope I would be wrong. I would like to see someone out there actually take Trump to task. But if they did, they would immediately be labeled the bad guy. They would immediately be attacked. MAGA would come after him. Trump would come after him even harder. So that's what you're up against. But as long as you are singing Trump's praises, you're a good guy and you're good at what you do. The minute you step out of line, he's going to yank you back in. And that's why we say it's a cult. A lot of people still gets offended at that and says, I can't believe you're still calling it a cult. Well, that's what they act like, folks. We're just calling it like we see it. When you can't step out of line with your leader, that the leader and the entire group doesn't come after you and try to destroy you, they want to sit and talk about us being snowflakes. But Donald Trump's the last guy on earth that could ever take a joke. He's the last guy on earth that could ever take a tough question. He's the last guy on earth who would ever face up to any scrutiny without just kicking against it and sicking his following on it. And that's exactly what cult leaders does. If you study any cult out there, the minute you try to step out of line with the leader, you got yanked back in and the flock went after you. But we're just going to continue to see Trump go out there and sit down for these softball interviews. And it's honestly kind of disheartening that in the world we live in today, no one really has the guts to take it to Trump. And they should absolutely have the guts regardless. But this guy is the failed former president. He's the guy that's coming back acting for a rematch. Don't act like that he's, anything but that. Hey, you got your ass handed to you back in 2020, whether you admit it or not, you did. And now you're coming back asking for a rematch. Why should we give you one when the guy that took over from you did a much better job than you? Kamala Harris has a record to run on, and you got a record to run from. No one will ever ask him those questions, and he is the biggest bully ever. And there's absolutely no Buster Douglas out there who will just stand up to that bully and say, I don't care if I get hit. Now, I know I'm always making my boxing analogies, but the whole reason Buster Douglas defeated Mike Tyson is because, A, his mother passed away a few weeks before the fight, and he didn't have he said nothing could hurt me after that. And B, he was not afraid to get hit by Mike Tyson. He stood his ground, stood straight in front of him. I would love to see one podcaster, one influencer, somebody sit down and be like Buster Douglas and go, you know what? I don't care if this guy hits me. I don't care if his mindless base tries to come at me. I really don't care, folks. I do not care one bit to say that the line is drawn in the sand, and I don't need MAGA. Okay, I'm not trying to appease those people. I don't in any way want them around me, or I don't care if I know they watch to troll me. I get that. I understand they watch to troll me. But I've seen so many people, and even people on the left, say, well, you got to stay friends with them. You got to be good to them. You got to, well, listen, I can be good to people all day. I can be good to people, and I can treat them with respect. I can treat them the way that I would like to be treated. I would go out of my way to help anybody. But I'm not going to sit there and platform an idiot. And I'm not going to entertain an idiot. And I'm not going to entertain somebody who's trying to take away democracy and it's okay with a dictator. So the line's in the sand. I do not care. About that. And I would have much more respect for the people out there who, when Trump barked at them, if just one time they would stand up and say, we don't give a shit about you. Put that bully in his place. And I guess we can't hold our breath and wait for the podcasters or the influencers to do it. So what we got to do is we got to go to the ballot box on November 5th, and we have to vote for Kamala Harris. And that's how we will finally pull our Buster Douglas moment out and take Trump down once and for all.